Everybody, welcome back to the forest garden. This is the rain I was hoping for. It's been somewhat of a dry spring actually, and cold, really cold. Polar vortex finally changed and blew out yesterday. Yeah, night before last was the last night of below freezing temperatures so far. It's only mid-May, and up here our zone is 4B, and the last frost date is typically between May 20th and May 30th. So I am pushing the envelope here. The long range forecast, including the 14-day forecast, is saying above seasonal temperatures, which means no temperatures below freezing. And I think well, all I can do is hope, like everybody does, every gardener does in the spring, hope that the frost doesn't come in and wipe out all of our hard work. So all these seedlings that we put in the ground, that we planted in the ground, we're just full. We got tons of them, way over seeded, which we typically do because we can take chances and maybe have enough even if we were to lose these early plants. Now keep in mind that I haven't done this in a number of years either, so this is the first major garden I've had since we not even since we sold the old house, but probably, I think I said 4 or 5 years ago maybe, when I had a decent sized vegetable garden. Planted a few vegetables at the cabin last year, but that wasn't anything significant. So like I said, this is the first major foray back into gardening, and this time in a forest and in a zone that I'm not used to and in soil conditions that I'm not used to. So a lot of trial and error this year. Anyway, what I want to talk about is that if you've been following along for 3 or 4 years, you know that I've definitely been more focused on living a wilderness lifestyle in the forests of Canada, and not an agricultural zone. And because of that, my influences have been different. When I first built my cabin, when I was what, 21, losing track already. About an hour south of here actually. When I built that, my major influence at the time was Henry David Thoreau, who I was reading, and Emerson, who I was reading as a teenager, and Swiss Family Robinson, Jeremiah Johnson, the Wilderness Family. Those were all my influences. So I was influenced to live a wilderness lifestyle then, but it didn't work out. Didn't last very long before I had to come out of the bush and get a job, and then life took over. But when I went back into the bush this time, my influence was Dick Kroenke. Again, more of a wilderness homesteader, and more in line with what I like to do, just explore wilder nature, like uncivilized and undeveloped land. And also, though, my passions are hunting and fishing, so I'm usually looking for land and looking for wilderness areas that support healthy fish and game populations. Anyway, the reason I'm bringing that up is that hunting and fishing is what I thought I could, and foraging is what I could do to live off the land. But things have changed. I visited Dick Kroenke's cabin last year, and if you know his story, you know that all of his food, most of his supplies, 95% of his food probably was flown in to him every week or 2 or 3, and he didn't really live off the land. He just caught some fish. Stopped hunting, I think, after the first year or two. And then we'd take donations of meat from other hunters and stuff, but it wasn't a primary source of his food. So I've basically been doing the same thing, and I've been fine with that. This pandemic, mind you, COVID pandemic, and the quarantine, and starting to get food shortage and all that kind of stuff, and my family became more vulnerable, more at risk. I realized that the path I was on was not really sustainable, wasn't the right path for me. So I'm going back to where I started with my self-reliance, and that's to become as completely self-reliant as possible, including and especially food security. So I'm happy to be back doing this. This is a pretty significant garden. It's been a lot of work, but the other part, if you go back and read my original articles on my self-reliance on my website, you'll see that I was really focused on, when I was making money, investing in my security, in my food security and my self-reliance, rather than in, say, the stock market, for example. So that meant buying tools that I could utilize to live sustainably or live self-sufficiently. I still really feel strongly about that, and I'm going back to that. So the investment in this garden has been significant, but I'm okay with that because I know if I was to stop making any income in the future, I want my cost of living to be so low that I'm not impacted, or that I have some time at least to find another source of income in order to survive. And it's way beyond just me. I can survive and quite happily on next to nothing, but I have a family that I have to support too, and that I have to inspire or influence and encourage to find their own paths through a good example, but also through assistance. And my way to do that is to help grow food for the family, not just for myself. So I'm creating some redundancy. This is a fair-sized garden. I've got now fruit trees going in as well. This is going to be a complete forest garden with all kinds of berries, all the different levels from the trees, the maple trees that you see behind me that you've seen us tap for maple syrup. So that's the canopy layer, and then the understory trees like the apple trees, the pear trees that we're planting, some of the great big shrubs, the nut trees, there's beech nuts here, there's oak trees, this one here, which is acorns for flour and stuff. So right down to the ground level plants, ground covers. So I've got a full food forest with all the levels in the forest going on here. Now the redundancy that I'm talking about is that closer to the cabin, I go back and forth, but what I've decided is right at the cabin itself, I'm building a greenhouse somewhat after this project, and I'll show you why, because it's going to incorporate the workshop as well. So I've decided instead of having the workshop closer to this garden, I'm going to put it right beside the forest kitchen, essentially, with the greenhouse out right in front of it, so that everything is contained in that one area. Got a few trees to take out with where the existing little garden was that I started last year, and I'll sort of tie that into the clearing with the greenhouse and the workshop and sun and the cabin and the forest kitchen, so it'll all be one contained area. That leaves the rest of the property a little bit less developed too, and lets me sort of expand on the longhouse area with the guys when they come up. So some of the compromises I've had to make in order to get this self-sufficient garden going quicker is using things like buying some plants, for example, instead of starting them from seed. But this fence you see behind me, did not want to do that at all. It wasn't in the plan. It wasn't in my plan, my idea of doing stuff here. I always wanted to have be plastic free, for example, and not buy as much. I wanted to make this fence completely out of wood and living hedge. It's just not practical. It's just a small group of workers, my family, and mostly me because they're busy too doing other stuff. So this is would have been impossible to get a fence built that was secure enough to keep animals out. And because this is not a hobby garden, this is for our self-sufficiency, self-reliance, this garden has to work and has to be productive, and I can't afford to lose it all to wildlife. It's been too much work, too much expense, and something like this deer fence is relatively cheap insurance against losing plants to wildlife. Now, I've got some work to do. I've got to get the top finished off. I have to stake down the bottom of it so nothing can climb under. Now, that's mainly just deer and moose is my biggest issue for destruction, not targeting the food to eat it, but just trampling it. I've already had my potatoes trampled by the moose down by the stream. Then the other thing is bears and raccoons and stuff like that. I don't know what... They didn't ruin the garden last year, but in any event, I do need to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to prevent animals from just walking through and causing destruction. All those sticks that I've been sticking in the ground around the garden beds is actually more for Kelly than for anything else. So she starts to see off-limit areas, like some paths that she can go down my paths, instead of just going directly through the garden like she does. So starting to train her not to ruin the garden. This deer fence, the intention is to get sort of a mound all the way around the entire perimeter of the garden, even if it's a small one on this side, and get that planted. I've got sea buckthorn, bare root plants coming in the mail. I'll have to pick them up at the post office soon. They'll think I've got 200 of them. They'll go like every 1.5 feet or something to go around the perimeter of the garden, maybe 2 feet. And eventually my plan is to build it like wood fence, just with stakes or wattle or whatever, and have the thick thorny hedge helping protect the garden from things like deer and things from walking through, like I said. Well, and the other reason that I started the plants early in the garden is because I had this rain coming in and that warm weather, and I wanted to get the plants in even before I got the fence up, because I wanted, you know, watering is an issue for me and will continue to be until we get, I think, got some plans. I think we might end up having to run more solar panels for the greenhouse, and then being able to tie in all the systems to be able to draw water from the creek or from that dug well that I have down by the road. That's the plan anyway. So when it's raining like this, I don't have water collection system set up yet, other than what drips off the cabin and the forest kitchen. So I do need to get troughs in, and I might even put a cistern in. We'll see if I break down and do that. Anyway, I think I'm gonna get out of the rain. Take a little break, dry off, have some lunch. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being patient through maybe this phase. You probably weren't expecting me to get into gardening after starting to watch what I'm doing, building wilderness cabins and stuff. But anyway, this is all part of self-reliance, and I'm happy to be back incorporating all of it back into my life. So appreciate your patience. I hope you're interested. But I'm going to get going, get back to work. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you at the cabin next time. Take care. Old Callie knows I'm finished talking, so she's going to go for the dummy. You want me to throw that? You're going to have to watch the fence though, okay?
Bye.